Hello, YouTube friends! My name is Constance, and this is Cruelty-Free Musings. Welcome to my channel, and to an entirely different kind of video. I know I say that a lot. I know that I say that I'm doing a different kind of video a lot. But this time, I honestly am doing something genuinely different. I swear. And by that I mean, I am launching a series on my channel which is not directly makeup related. If you are interested in anything that is on my face, it will still all be linked in the description box. Not linked. I don't go to that much effort, but it will all be listed in the description box. But that is the extent to which makeup will be discussed in this series of videos. My sleeves are knocking things over. The topic at hand is going to be typology as it relates to politics within the world of politics. Or something. You know, something like, I apologize if you could hear that. The front door is right there. And for some reason, Husbear and his friend were walking through it and then closing it. This is also my first time recording with someone in the house, so hooray! If you can hear voices in the background, it's just them. They're playing Final Fantasy TCG and trading cards. So, we are talking about typology and politics, and I just want to clarify something right off the bat, which is to say, I am not going to be talking about the Myers-Briggs types of anyone who is currently in politics, or anyone who was in politics, or anyone who is friend related to politics or in commentary, or anything like that. I do not care. That is not what this is about. I am interested in looking at how people think about things, and I happen to know a lot about politics because I got interested in politics, and I have two modes which are not interested and way more interested than the average person. So I am way more interested than the average person in politics. I keep up with it pretty up to the minute. So that's going to be the source of a lot of my material, is politics, current culture, and how it's interacting with politics. And, you know, ideas and stuff. So, without further ado, let us get into the first discussion topic for typology and politics, my new playlist on my channel, which is not makeup related at all. Okay, so I listen to a lot of podcasts, radio shows, you know, whatever you want to call them, from the Daily Wire. I got into them from someone recommended Ben Shapiro to me, so I started listening to Ben Shapiro, and I was like, oh, someone who actually thinks that the conservatives are okay and have valid ideas. I'm on board. If you are doing anything in the world at large, you are getting the message that conservatives are bad and evil for having the views that they do. So I was always really interested in, like, science and culture and literature, so I engaged a lot with a bunch of stuff that was telling me that I was, you know, that was low grade, telling me that I was evil for thinking the way that I did, and who my parents were, essentially. Because, you know, I inherited a lot of my worldview from my parents because that's the way that worldviews work. So, I have absorbed a lot of mainstream culture, and a lot of mainstream culture has been telling me all of my life that how I was raised is essentially evil. And I don't believe that. Uh, so when I started encountering people that told me that what I think is not actually evil, I was like, I am on board. Tell me more. And help me to engage with the culture in a meaningful way from a perspective that actually completely and fully makes sense to me because I was raised with these values and mindset. And some opinions have changed here and there in the wash. But overall, I am still essentially a conservative person. So, I watch a lot of Daily Wire, so I don't watch it. I listen to it on podcast form. I listen to a lot of Daily Wire stuff. I listen to Ben Shapiro, Andrew Klavan, and the Matt Walsh Show, and associated members of the intellectual dark web. But today we are going to be talking about the Matt Walsh Show because he gets a lot of hate mail. And I thought that it was interesting that he gets a lot of hate mail and where it comes from. And I wanted to kind of explore the typology behind the kind of hate mail that he gets. So let's get into this, the typology and the psychology behind hate mail. All right, so first of all, I am going to be approaching this from the perspective of cognitive functions. So, cognitive functions are a Jungian concept. If you're familiar with Carl Jung, he was a psychologist in the early days of psychology, like contemporary with Sigmund Freud, and he developed this concept that people have different patterns in their brains and they have a dominant uh, structure in how their brains work. Essentially, he laid out a framework where there are 8 different cognitive functions, and people can have any one of these 8 cognitive functions as their dominant, as the function that their brain most likes living in. And then a couple of disciples of his, uh, Isabel Myers and Carolyn Myers-Briggs, mother-daughter pair, they got really interested in these cognitive functions and they decided to flesh out the system, and that's where the Myers-Briggs typology concept comes from. They were trying to create a roadmap that would tell people, okay, this is what your cognitive function map looks like. And their big insight was that cognitive functions are related to each other in polarities. So there are always going to be introverted cognitive functions paired with the extroverted cognitive functions because you have to be able to look inside yourself and you have to be able to interact with the world. You have to have both. And there's thinking and feeling, and those are paired up. And introverted thinking is linked with extroverted feeling because they're a polarity and they're 2 sides of the same coin. They're essentially related, but they're different aspects of the same thing. So they have essentially the same worldview. And then there's the same pairing for the perceiving functions, introverted intuition, extroverted sensing, extroverted intuition. So that's the nutshell version of cognitive functions. Today I'm primarily going to be talking about introverted thinking and extroverted thinking as it relates to persuasion. Because the 2 thinking functions are both essentially concerned with facts, data, how things are in the world. They're they're like not opposed to people necessarily. Like, thinkers are not abrasive, roll all over people necessarily, but they are as concerned with all the rest of the data in the world that they're gathering as they are with their feelings and the feelings of people around them. So I think that this is a really interesting thing to look at, how the two different attitudes, introverted thinking, extroverted thinking, how the two different attitudes of thinking view persuasion differently. Okay, so let's get into actually the inciting incident. On the Matt Walsh Show, as I have mentioned, he gets a lot of hate. He gets a lot of hate mail. And I'm sure that part of it is that, but part of it's just that he's on the internet. Part of it is you notice it because he actually reads it. But regardless, he gets a lot of hate mail. And in particular, he was on the Ben Shapiro show on the Sunday special, and he talked about not bringing the Bible in to convince people that are not using the Bible already as one of their fundamental principles, which seems really straightforward to me, but he got a lot of hate about it, where a lot of people were like, please just stop talking about the Bible, you are so wrong. And I was like, I don't understand. What do you think that he said that was so evil? But it made for a good starting point for this video. So there's that. Um, so his contention is that people can be convinced with reason, but you can't just throw the Bible at them and expect it to matter at all. Hold on, let me let in my cat. Hello, sad cat. Do you want to come in? You have two choices. It is be on this side of the door or be on that side of the door. You probably prefer that side of the door. No? Fun. Neat. So we were talking about the Matt Walsh Show, and Matt Walsh getting a lot of hate about saying that you can't use the Bible as your starting point, your starting premise when you're arguing with someone, when you're trying to persuade someone who doesn't already accept that the Bible is a valid starting point, which seems logical to me. And and clearly it seemed logical to him as well, or he would not have said it. But he got a bunch of hate saying, you do not understand, and you are telling people the incorrect thing. And I was thinking about it, and especially how he was articulating his response to this. You are telling people the incorrect thing. And I was hearing such strong overtones of extroverted thinking from Matt Walsh, and such overtones of introverted thinking from the people that were emailing him. So I thought that this would be a great thing to make a video about. So, extroverted thinking is all about what works in the external world. It's all about getting results. So, someone who uses extroverted thinking as one of their cognitive functions, it doesn't actually matter whether it's their primary function or not. All people, pretty much everyone with extroverted thinking in their stack is going to, on some level, be oriented to how things are working in the external world and judging their success based on that. The point of this is that people who have extroverted feeling in their stack, FPs and TJs, if you're familiar with the Myers-Briggs system, anything TJ or anything FP will both use this extroverted thinking, introverted feeling polarity, and they're going to have some aspect of this: how am I affecting the world? Am I getting the result that I want in the world? To their outlook, just because of their brain's orientation to the world. So this is a really cool thing to look out for. I like it. I like thinking about things like this. Because as I have noted, I have only two modes. I have not interested at all, way more interested than the average person. So I am in this mode of typology all the time, pretty much. So, to contrast with that, introverted thinking is looking at the purity of the data. It's wanting to make sure that all of the steps are logically correct and that they hang together, and that every little piece that goes into the puzzle is perfectly accurate. Because if you don't have accurate pieces, how are you going to make a true whole? So they are much more interested in the precision of the individual data points than they are how the data is interacting with the outside world. So here you can start to see how these how these two paradigms are interacting in this scenario that I'm describing, where Matt Walsh is saying, look, I believe that the Bible is true, but it doesn't matter what I believe. If I'm talking to someone who doesn't believe that the Bible is true, I'm not going to get anywhere. I'm not going to have a good effect in the world if I bring the Bible into it. Even though I believe completely that it is true. So, and then the vitriolic email responses that he would get, he got them actually for an entire week, were all like, you don't, you're getting the details wrong. The thing that introverted thinking loves about the world, loves about data, is how neatly everything can fit together. And I actually use my primary cognitive function is neither of these, but I am a TJ personally, so I use effectiveness. So introverted thinking actually makes no sense to me at all. I know a lot of people who have introverted thinking as one of their primary functions, though, so I know a lot about how it looks, but I don't really have the perspective of how it feels from the inside. But introverted thinking cares a lot about purity of data, and the thing that matters to it is the data that goes through the process, because the process is perfect. Like, that's the thing about introverted thinking. Someone who is using introverted thinking as one of their primary cognitive functions has gone through all of their cognitive functions and ironed out every bug that is in there. Their processes, their logic is rigorous and is continually being refined, because it's the thing that introverted thinking finds the most attractive. It's the way that introverted thinking loves interacting with the world the most. So, um, introverted thinking really cares about the quality of data that goes into that process, because they've already done the hard work of getting the process all sorted. So they want to make sure that all of the data that's actually entering is as accurate as possible, so that once it goes through the process, the answer will be true and correct in the most perfect sense. It's really, it's it's a completely foreign concept to me. Like, I can describe it to you, but it makes no sense to me at all. I'm like, okay, yes, there are a lot of true things that all fit together, and different people have different aspects of true, and if you fit them all together, then you have a larger version of truth. And, one person cannot have a monopoly on truth, and no person is going to be able to produce complete truth on their own, because you're limited. You only get truth by bringing it out into the external world and refining it against other people. That's why I have a YouTube channel, actually, is because this is what I'm doing. I am bringing my perspective on the world out into the world, presenting it to you, and your interactions with me are going to tell me where I've gotten the truth wrong. And my interactions with the spoken word are going to tell me how true the things that I am saying. Everyone does it to some extent. I do it because this is my primary evaluator. I have to make things real in the outside world before I can evaluate them, which means I have to talk about them. So I love learning and making connections, but I can't evaluate the connections that I'm making until I'm talking about them. So that is why I have a YouTube channel, and that's why I make videos about ethics and typology and the patterns that I observe in the world. That's my perspective on truth and creating truth, is that you have to bring it out into the external world, and there you create truth. The introverted thinking perspective on truth making is that you curate the data that you bring into yourself, and you clean up the processes that analyze the data that you bring into yourself. And that is how you produce truth. It's an internal thing. It's a very subjective thing. Introverted thinking is subjective. It's taking data into yourself and refining it into truth. Truth, capital T, is how introverted thinking thinks about it, but it's subjective. It's something that no one else could actually get to, because it's based on all of the work that they've done in refining their own thought processes. Introverted thinking has an objective reality truth. It's just in the feeling world. Their objective reality is how people around them feel. And introverted thinking people believe that if people have pure truth, immature introverted thinking tends to be weighted towards there is my pure truth, and that is the only pure truth. But mature introverted thinking can kind of branch out and accept that their view of the world is in fact subjective, even though it doesn't feel subjective. It feels like the truth. But so the perspective is, if people come to the truth, which introverted thinking holds and owns, then the relationship things will all be smoothed out because everyone will think as they ought to think. Everyone will have a true understanding of the world, and they will think as they ought to think, and then people will relate to each other and to the world appropriately. So there is a place for all of these cognitive functions and for both of these polarities in the world. There is. I definitely make more fun of introverted thinking than I ought, because it still sounds ridiculous to me that you have truth, that any human individual has truth, capital T. There are sources of truth. There are some sources of truth that are really reliable. And mostly they're pools of human knowledge. They're not individuals. But I'll let it go. To bring it back to the people declaring to Matt Walsh, you are wrong if people just accept, if you just beat people over the head with the Bible enough, they will eventually accept that it is correct. That is an introverted thinking perspective on the world, which is trying to get this piece of data called the Bible, that this person who is using introverted thinking in some way regards as pure, and forcing it through this process of someone, through someone else's mental processes, and saying, here, if you have this piece of pure data, if you have this piece of true data, then you will come to truth. Really, I promise, I swear, this is truth. If you accept it, you will come to truth, capital T. But if you try to force this perspective of this thing that I believe is pure data on someone else, they're going to be less inclined to accept it because you're trying to force it on them. So it's not going to work, which was Matt Walsh's perspective. Look, I accept that the Bible is true. I believe it. But I also believe that persuading people through means that they consider persuasive is more effective. It works, rather than just presenting them with a piece of data that I see as pure, but which they don't accept as pure. And no matter how much I present it to them as a pure foundation, they're not going to accept it as such. So it's more reasonable to go through the process of trying to persuade through science and logic rather than trying to persuade from first premises, no matter how accurate those first premises might actually be. And even if that person that you're trying to persuade might believe in the future that you were correct and that they were wrong at this point in time. Trying to force that issue on them now is still not going to work. And that is effectiveness in a nutshell. Use the things that work, not the things that you know to be true for your own personal subjective perspective, because other people can't access your personal subjective perspective. They can only access their own personal subjective perspective. I believe that that was a conclusion. I hope you enjoyed, or learned something, or both. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Knocking things off. Again, these sleeves, I swear. Like, comment, subscribe, do whatever you feel like. Thanks for watching, and goodbye for now.